as you guys can see, I'm currently in KvK, and this KvK is quickly coming to a close. So today I'm going to give you guys 12 different tips plus a very simple little bonus tip at the very end of this video that should really help you the next time that you find yourself in the Lost Kingdom. These are going to be tips that are going to be things that you should do and also things that you should avoid doing during your time in the Lost Kingdom. Now, as you guys know, I'm a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, which means they sponsor a couple of videos on the channel every month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys. So if you appreciate videos like this, drop a thumbs up and consider subscribing, because you probably think you are, but you're actually not. Anyway, with all that out of the way, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, this list is not really in any particular order, but the first two tips I'm going to give you guys are new features to the game since the last time that I made a video like this. It's been over a year since we've talked about some mistakes players are making in KvK and some tips revolving KvK. So the first thing that's changed is actually a new change, and that is if you click on the map, it just gives you the ability to teleport or march. Previously you had to click and hold, and that is no longer the case. Same thing on mobile or on a tablet, you just tap and now you get these options. Okay, but that's not the first tip. The first tip has to do with quick command. Okay, again, this is a new feature, and this is a blessing for players who are playing on mobile, on tablet, and also for players that tend to find themselves accidentally clicking and swarming an enemy city, an enemy flag, when they didn't mean to. They're just fighting in dot mode and they accidentally take a bunch of deads. Okay, quick command is a new feature where it essentially functions almost exactly the same as right clicking on PC, except it is left clicking, or if you're on mobile, it's simply tapping on the map. So let me explain what exactly this does. Let me go ahead and send out a march here. Okay, let's send out this infantry army. This is Ragnar Prime with CPO Prime, and if we turn on quick command, you'll see a green dot show up right next to it. Now with my army selected, I can click on anywhere on the map. I'm left clicking, or on mobile it would be just tapping on the map, and my army moves to that location. Okay, now on quick command you can turn on or off the ability to attack certain targets. So if you want the ability to attack barbarians, I would turn this on, but notice if it's off, I can't actually hit this barbarian. I'm clicking directly on it over and over and over again. There's nothing I can do. I cannot hit this barbarian. It is impossible to hit this barbarian with that box turned off. Now again, this is only in the case of quick command being turned on with barbarians turned off. Okay, so don't get confused here. It says attackable targets. If this is on, that means barbarian is an attackable target. Now I can actually hit them, and you'll see the confirmation is that, and it's easier to see in dot mode, but you'll see 3 red arrows come around that target. Okay, if I come over here, you'll see just a little green arrow pointing at the map, but once I'm actually hitting something, you'll see the 3 red arrows come in and focus on that target. Okay, so that's how quick command works. But the best part about this has nothing to do with barbarians. It is the buildings and aligned troops. Okay, this is huge because, like I said before, a lot of players, especially in dot mode, in massive fights, they don't know exactly where their armies are, and they might accidentally be hitting an enemy building. Okay, so this includes, again, forts, flags, things of that nature. The pass, right? You're fighting right up against a pass. So if you have buildings turned off, like mine is right here, meaning there's no check mark, that means that I cannot hit a building, an enemy building. So in dot mode, it would be impossible for me to actually click on an enemy building. So where would be, well, all the enemy, I guess it would be over here, right? But you'll see there's a new marker that shows up when you can hit a building. It's this little wrecking ball thing, which I guess just indicates demolishing the building. Okay, but with quick command on and buildings turned off, I can't actually hit that. All I can do is walk here. You can see with that little green arrow. Okay, so that is why quick command is a life changer for players, again, who accidentally find themselves hitting flags, hitting enemy cities, things of that nature. And again, same thing with aligned troops. Okay, if you are fighting alongside allies that are not in your coalition, but you don't want to hit them, they will show up as orange dots on the map, and you don't want to hit them because that's going to start some drama. Okay, so what you want to do is have aligned troops, again, off. That way you can't actually hit those aligned troops. Use quick command, take advantage of it. If you're a PC player, then it might be a little hard to adjust to because you're so used to right clicking. Okay, and I know what you're thinking, you know, if you have this on, you know, if I right click, I can still hit the barbarians. Okay, so you still have to be very careful. It's going to take a little bit of retuning in your brain if you're a PC player to switch to left clicking with quick command, but it's very important to start using this feature if you are in scenarios where you run the risk of hitting your allies or hitting a building. Moving on to tip number 2 is filter mode, and this is a relatively new feature, and it's a little bit confusing compared to quick command because it functions, this window that you're looking at over here functions opposite as quick command. Okay, so the way that this works on this, once filter mode is turned on with this green button, the things that you check off here in this window are things that you will not see. Okay, so again, it's the opposite of quick command. The things that are checked here are things you can attack. Filter mode is the opposite. Things that are checked here are things you cannot see. Okay, so this includes things such as enemy names, troops, and portraits, map icons, which are things such as alliance and coalition markers, which are very important, and also things like aligned or neutral armies and your allied armies as well. So this is a feature that you definitely want to use if you're playing especially in dot mode or strategic view, because what you want to do is, first of all, a lot of times when you're playing in dot mode, you don't really care about the portrait of the enemy, right? You don't care about who you're actually hitting. You just want to hit the target that's closest to you most of the time. But let's say that there's so many friendly or allied armies in the same location and you can't really see where your armies are. That could be a problem. What you can do is check this box, and now all of a sudden all of your allied armies turned into these little, they're not even, they go from these like sort of squares or diamonds into just little dots with a pillar of light coming off of them. Okay, so it's much smaller, it's way better visibility, and they effectively turn it into a sort of 2D spot on the map, whereas this is more of a 3D thing. As you can see, some of these dots overlap one another, or I should say some of these squares or diamonds overlap one another. I guess that's kind of the case here for the dots as well, but it's much more flat, they're much smaller, and it's much easier to then see your army, which would be a green diamond, overlapping on top of all of the small blue dots. A lot of times what I'm doing in a big open field fight is I'm blocking out allies' names, troops, portraits. I'm blocking out even a lot of the aligned armies in the field as well, and the only things that I want to see are enemy troops. I don't care about the names, I don't care about the portraits. All I want to see are enemy troops and the map icons. Okay, I want to see markers from my alliance and coalition because I want to know, where are we balling up? Should I retreat? Why is everyone retreating? Where's everyone going? Right, you want to make sure, and this is very important, keep your map markers on. Okay, keep map icons on or visible, and turn off basically everything else. Okay, so make sure you use filter mode. It increases your visibility by a ton. It makes it easier to click the exact target that you want to click, and that in combination with quick command will make sure that you barely see the aligned units and you won't click them as well. Same thing with buildings and things of that nature. And so both of these new features help out a ton in KvK. Okay, tip number 3 is super basic. Okay, you might even wonder, Omniarch, why are you even saying this? Like, obviously, right? Obviously, but you would be surprised how many players mess this up, including players that are Rally Garrison players, Giga Chad Mega Whales, those top tier players. Even they mess this up sometimes. And so if you're watching this video right before you go into KvK, then this is your reminder to set your preset armies to what you want them to be. Okay, numbers 1 through 5 or 1 through 7, depending on how many armies you're actually running in the open field. I only run 5 armies because it just makes the most sense for my account, but you want to make sure that you have your armies set up so that way you can quickly deploy them at a moment's notice. And ideally, the way that I do this is I set these up from slowest march down to fastest march, right? So this would be my slowest, this would be my second slowest, this is like middle of the pack, this is, my second fastest, and this is my fastest army. Because if you're going to click and march all of your armies all out at once with the multi-select feature, it's going to dispatch them in order, right? And so you want, ideally, and again, this isn't required, but this is a little bonus tip. Okay, you want to have your slowest army go out first, that way the fastest army is going to catch up. It has the highest probability of catching up. Okay, so that's how I like to do it. But you want to make sure that all the presets are set. All of it is set up with your expansion. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So you can set this up, really, you want to have everything set up except your expansion, and then once you pop your first expansion of the KvK, go back in and reset up those armies with the correct number of troops and troop types. But you want to make sure that all your armies have equipment on them. You want to set up your equipment presets as well. I know my head's kind of blocking it over here. You want to make sure that all of your armies and your primary commanders have the proper formation with the correct armaments and everything along those lines. Make sure your armor governments are set up properly as well. These are all things you want to do before KvK starts, or at least before fighting starts. Okay, get all this out of the way. That way when you're going into a very intense fight, you don't have to think about, oh, that's right, I moved my equipment over to my Huo because I'm using him in Sunset Canyon or whatever. Forget Sunset Canyon. Okay, forget that. If you're going into a fight, you don't want to make that big risk of fighting without gear on. Okay, on top of this is talents. Make sure you have all the talents that you want to use for open field fighting. Some players like to switch their talents around in the off season, so that way they do better in Sunset Canyon. I do that sometimes too, because I just have so many talent resets, I don't know what to do with them. But make sure that, you know, if you have a commander that typically is, you know, sometimes used for garrisons, and this time you're going to use them for open field fighting, switch your talents over to the open field fighting build. That's, you know, for players using like Gorgo, for example, like this might be a garrison build, but you can switch it to an open field build, and that's going to perform much better for you in the open field. So again, tip number 3, super basic, but lots of players mess it up all the time because they're not thinking. So this is your reminder: set your presets. Tip number 4 is something that I just mentioned with tip number 3, and that is using army expansions, and in particular a 50% advanced army expansion. Okay, this is much better than the 25%. For me, I use advanced army expansions even if I'm not going to fight for 4 hours. Okay, even if I'm going, like, let's say this is a very important fight and I'm only going to be going into it for an hour, I'm still going to use an advanced army expansion. Why? Because for me, I get the advanced army expansions from the mysterious merchant. Okay, the courier station, she comes around every once in a while, and you can find these for 1,500 gems. That is the smallest number of gems that I've ever seen the advanced army expansion. I don't believe it ever shows up for lower. That would be insane. But typically these are a bit more expensive in the VIP shop. Where do they even show up here? Yes, 2,500. Ideally you don't want to pay 2,500. If you have to, then do it. But you probably want to get your gems worth. If you're paying 2,500, you probably want to use it for the full 4 hours if you can. But for me, I usually get them for 1,500 from the courier station. And the way that I look at this is 1,500 gems to increase my army capacity by 50%. If you guys didn't know, army capacity, the number of troops in your army, is directly proportional to how much normal damage you do, counterattack damage, how much all damage across the board. Okay, how much skill damage, smite damage, all of it, all of that is basically the number of troops that you have is a multiplier for your damage. Okay, so that's why if you have 20,000 troops in your army, you're on red, your skill shots are going to they're not going to do any damage, right? Barely at all. Whereas if you have 400,000 army troops in that army, you're going to deal way more damage than if you only had 220. Okay, so you want to make sure that, you know, if you're going into a fight that matters, then you want to have as many troops as possible. Even if, again, you don't use it for 4 hours, you should. If you can use it for 4 hours, great, get the most value out of it. But even if you're going into a fight where you think the enemy is going to be strong, you think they're going to show up, then even if you're only going to fight for 1 hour, 2 hours, I still would pop this, because 1,500 gems, I know that sounds like a lot for free-to-play players, and it is, but you know, this is the reason that you play in off season is for these fights, right? Like the KvK is the whole point of the game for a lot of players, and so you want to have as many advantages as you can in every single instance of going into open field fights, and having 50% more troops is huge. It's a big advantage even over the players using 25%. Now, some instances I will use a 25, and admittedly it's going to be instances where I'm not really sure if the enemies are going to show up or not, or you know, if we're fighting like a B seed kingdom, like someone super weak compared to us, like we know we have overwhelming advantage, we have overwhelming field, we have overwhelming, like just way better players, right? Then it's like, okay, am I really going to burn a 50 just to, you know, maybe I will, just to like really farm kills, but like if I'm only going to be on for like an hour or two, and like the enemy's super weak, maybe I'll just pop a 25 and see what happens. But most of the time I'm using a 50, even if I'm not going to fight for 4 hours, because 1,500 gems to improve all of your trades for that entire time is very worth it. Now, like I said, this is really the only thing that I think is worth spending gems on in the mysterious merchant shop anyway, right? Otherwise I'm really only spending resources here unless there's like an event where you have to spend gems or something like that, or if there's an event where you should buy stuff from the mysterious merchant to get like you know, items from for that specific holiday or something, then sure, maybe I'll buy like a 90% off gold token or something like that, right? But besides that, like really the only thing worth buying from the mysterious merchant is the 1,500 gem cost 50% expansion. And in the same vein as that, and this is like a little bit of a bonus tip, okay, if you're going into a fight where you think a 50% expansion is worth it, then that also means you should be using a 10% attack or a 10% defense item from the shop. And I know you can get these in other places. Where's the, here it is, defense. These are 750 for the defense tokens, and the attack tokens I think are 600. They're a little bit cheaper. I don't even know what they're like, way up here. I almost never buy the attack ones. I really never use the attack ones. Are they actually farther? Yeah, they're farther down, but they're cheaper. Anyway, you can use either one of these. Some players like the attack bonus because they feel that if you are overwhelmed in the field, then the extra defense is going to do anything for you anyway, so you might as well hurt the enemy a little bit more while you're out there. It depends on your philosophy and what armies you're using. I tend to use the defense more. I find it to be a little bit more impactful, even though it costs a little bit more. But if you're going to go into an open field fight where you're going to be using a 50% expansion, you might as well be using a 10% boost item as well, and grab a rune while you're at it, okay? Whether it's a 7/7 rune or a 10% health rune or whatever you can get your hands on, whatever battle stats you can get going into that fight, try to grab a rune, especially if you're free to play players, okay? A lot of times whale players are too lazy to get a rune. That's just how it is. They shouldn't be, but you know, I've heard, I'm on Discord calls, I hear people saying that they're too lazy to get runes, okay? Don't not get them. Get runes, get your runes, okay? Especially if you're free to play, get all the stats you can get, because you need all the stats you can get, and it's going to make a big difference. And finally, again, if you're going to use that 50% expansion, make sure you have the correct city skin selected, okay? Most of the time it's going to be Twilight Falls, but you know, it could be something else. I made a huge mistake for the first big fights at KvK where I was actually fighting as Germany civilization. I forgot to change civs going into KvK, and that was a mistake I made. So make sure that all those things are aligned for your 50% expansion so you get the most value out of it. But you should pretty much always be fighting with either a 50 or a 25, but most of the time it should be 50, even if you're not going to use the whole thing. Okay, that last tip was very long, even though it was pretty basic, but the next tip I want to talk about here is fighting in dot mode. Okay, this is dot mode. I prefer dot mode. A lot of players actually like the new strategic view where you can see the different troop types. Okay, so you could turn this on, strategic view unit types. A lot of players like to do this so that way they can see the type of unit that they're hitting, right? So this is Ragnar Prime. This is a infantry army. Now keep in mind, this specific icon is showing you the units in that army when it leaves the city. Okay, so you might see an integration icon and think that it's a mixed army. It's not. It's probably going to be an archer player that is hiding a single troop of a different type in the army to change that little icon, just so that way people don't hit them, because a lot of players like to target archers. For me, I don't like these bigger, to me, when it shows the troop type, it looks larger. I don't know if it's just my perception or whatever the case might be, but for me, these strategic view where it shows the unit type, it looks bigger. I don't know, I think it's bigger. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks bigger. I prefer the smaller dots, even though I get less information. Really, in a big open field fight, I'm not calculating the troop type that I'm hitting, because it doesn't matter. What matters for me is hitting whoever's closest to me. I don't want to lose rage. I don't want to go too deep into the enemy murder ball just to hit an archer. Okay, what matters the most, and what I find to be most effective in open field fighting, is just hit whoever's closest to you always. That's it. If you get pulled too far into the ball, run away. It doesn't matter who you're actually hitting. What matters is that you're hitting something, you're keeping your rage bar up, and you're casting your active skills in the correct direction. Okay, that's what matters most. Seeing the troop type of the enemy, it is nice, and if the icon was smaller, I would use it, but it's not. And so to me, that's not as valuable as having a smaller dot. So I prefer the smaller dot. I hit the thing closest to me. I'm a simple guy. Okay, so play in dot mode when you can, and this is especially true now that mobile players have quick command. Okay, yes, you can in quick command, you can you know, just tap. Okay, I know I'm on PC, but if I were on mobile, this would still be working. I would just be tapping and I would be moving, and I could also be tapping to hit a target. Okay, so mobile players effectively have the same as right clicking has always been on PC, okay, with quick command. So always use quick command and always fight in dot mode. I think those are very important. Also, while you're in dot mode, I would keep your screen flicker on. I know a lot of players like to turn off screen flicker. It's annoying. You're at the edges of the screen are flashing red or blue because someone's jumping into your city, whatever. For me, when you're in dot mode, it's going to be hard to tell if you're getting hit without screen flicker, right? I mean, you can tell because, you know, if you're running away and you're still seeing the attack icons over here, then you might still be getting hit. Or if you see your health bars like chunking down, then like, yeah, you're getting swarmed. But like, really, I want to know the moment that I'm being targeted. I want to know, because if you don't know that exact second and you're moving into the enemy murder ball and you take, you know, 5 normal attacks from 10 different armies, and then it takes you 5 seconds to walk back, so that's another 5 normal, that's 10 normal attacks from, you know, 10 different enemies or whatever, like you're gonna get wrecked. So you don't want to do that. You want to know the moment that you're getting hit. Keep screen flicker turned on if you can stand it. I hate it, I know, but it's worth it to me. I need to know the moment I'm getting hit. The second it happens, I need to know. Okay, tip number 6 has to do with territory. Okay, so what you want to do is ideally never be off of alliance territory, especially in instances where there's heavy fighting going on, whether it's Kingsland, whether it's before, you know, past 7, whatever the case might be. You want to keep your city on alliance territory, so you are able to teleport onto coalition territory, but you probably should not do that unless it's an emergency, or you know that you can be safe, or you know that that alliance can accept you if they need to. And the game even warns you with this orange circle around your city. Okay, so right now, if I try to teleport, you know, over here, you'll see that it is a green circle, which means I am safe on this territory. Okay, if it's an orange circle, that means you can teleport there, but you're not safe. You can be rallied, you can be swarmed. Okay, which is something that, you know, if you're under like 70 mil, like, you could just be swarmed down by a giga whale who's close enough and they feel like doing it. So please be careful with where your city is located. Do not teleport onto coalition territory thinking you're safe. You are not. Likewise, if your alliance takes a pass and you want to random teleport into an enemy zone, for example, okay, you know, yes, you could take the pass and then you could random teleport. Once you land on that zone, you can drop tags and you can random teleport around to get like a really good spot, so you're up against like an enemy pass or something like that. That is very risky. Okay, it's very risky. You can be imprisoned, you can be swarmed, you could be rallied, whatever the case might be. So only random teleport around zones if you know what you're doing, you know your risk is very low, you don't think players are going to swarm you, you don't think that they're going to hit you, or if you know that the, you know, alliances you're fighting have already used their imprison, whatever. But random teleporting around zones is useful sometimes, but more often than not, unless you're like over 150 million or something like that, like you probably shouldn't be random teleporting around zones. So again, tip number 6, just stay on alliance territory. Just do it. Unless you're like a very advanced player, you know exactly what you're doing and where you are. Stay on alliance territory. You know, you don't want to give your alliance leaders a heart attack by having to worry about your city when you might be offline. And speaking of going offline, related to this is, you know, if you're on the front lines, you're fighting and you're going to go offline, then you should be, you know, sharing your location into alliance chat or coalition chat and saying like, hey, does anybody want my spot? That way, if there's a rally or garrison leader who is coming online, they can take a good spot at the front line, and then you want to teleport back to your safe zone. Okay, that would be your corner zones, basically, depending on the KvK map that you're in. But you want to teleport back to safety because you just don't want to run the risk of getting zeroed. If you use an 8-hour P shield and then you sleep for 8 hours and 15 minutes, then your P shield's gone, you can get zeroed. Okay, so you know, you might think you're safe, but you're not. So if you have to stay in risky or suspicious or sketchy territory, then make sure that first of all, you give the best spots to the best players that are online, and second of all, use a 24-hour P shield. Okay, don't be goofing off with those 8 hours in sketchy territory. It's never worth it. Tip number 7 is a tip that I always give players in these types of videos, and yet still I see it in every kingdom, every alliance. Everyone is pretty much guilty of doing this at some point in the Rise of Kingdoms journey, and that is do not reinforce a flag from far away. Okay, if I send this army and this is a minute and 18 seconds, that's too long. Sorry, too long. Don't take a minute, don't take 2 minutes, don't take 5 minutes, don't take 8 minutes. Okay, especially if it's a building flag and you're using like you're building your alliance skill. Okay, time is money, ladies and gentlemen, and the speed with which you move across a newly opened zone is crucial, and you're slowing things down by trying to reinforce from far away. You're taking up space in that city, or in that flag, fort or pass or whatever, just walking. You're not even there, you're walking there. Okay, so don't reinforce from far away. The ideal strategy to reinforce something would be to march your army close enough. So in this example, I'm going to be, you can hop around in different tiles, hop around in different cities. Ideally, what would happen is this would be an alliance, or this, I guess, would be a friendly city. They would be in my alliance, and I could jump into their city and then jump into the flag. Okay. So I would put my Ragnar in their city, and then I would jump immediately into this flag, because that's the closest possible way to just jump right into the city right away. Okay. That's the best way to do it. City hopping and alliance or resource node hopping. That's how you want to get close to the flag, or close to the rally, or close to whatever you're reinforcing, and then jump in at the last second. That way you're not hogging space, because there could be somebody closer to you trying to get into that flag or rally, and they can't because you're walking from 2.5 minutes away. So just cut that bad habit. I know things get crazy in the heat of war, but only reinforce things that you're right next to. Okay, on the topic of flags and rallies and things of that nature, a lot of players that are really strong like to swarm down flags, forts, or rallies, or whatever the case might be, and it's a great strategy, and it is the meta right now, especially in Kingsland. You have to be swarming things, even if you're going to take a bad trade. If it means that you can stop a flag from building or something like that, then it could cost you the KvK. So definitely swarm things down if you're a big player. But tip number 8 has to do with who should be swarming and when you should stop. Okay, really the players that should be swarming things down, if it's coming towards the end of KvK, unless you're trying to drop power or whatever the case might be, like, you probably shouldn't be swarming under 100 million, right? Like, I mean, if you're the only one there and this is like a make or break flag or fort, whatever the case might be, okay, sure, like, take one for the team. But like 90% of the time, the only people that should be swarming things down are those players over 100 million or 120 million or whatever the case is, because they've got the troops to spare. You really take bad trades when you swarm down a full, or even like a 2/3 full flag or something like that, especially if there's only like 2 or 3 players swarming it down. So make sure that the only people swarming these things down are players who have the troops to lose. You don't want to be swarming things down and then you can't field your 4 or 5 armies, right? Then you're just useless for the rest of KvK pretty much, or you're going to be stuck cheeseburgering out of your city, or you're going to be stuck just like partial filling rallies and flags. And I'm not saying that that's not important and useful, but you want to be able to field as well. Okay, field control is what wins KvKs, along with successful rallying garrisons. But the other thing when it comes to swarming down a flag or a fort or whatever is that if you are swarming and you're hitting the target, then you should retreat when you get to yellow. The reason that you should be retreating at yellow is because first of all, I think, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, I think only 20 armies can be hitting a specific flag or fortress or something along those lines. Okay, I think 20 is the max, 20 armies. It could be more than that, but I'm pretty sure only 20 armies can be hitting something at the exact same time. That means that if you're hitting it and you go down to yellow, then that means a fully healthy other player might not be able to hit that flag because you're still hitting it, right? And also under yellow is when you take a majority of your sev wounds and deads. Okay, it's like exponential. As your troop count in your army goes down, the number of sevs and deads you take exponentially goes up. So like a majority of the sevs and deads you take are under 50%, and especially under 30%. Like you take a majority of your sevs and deads in that range, which is why a lot of times in open field fights you should retreat under like 50 or 40%, unless it's like a fight to sad face type of moment. It's a do or die type of moment, it is what it is. Sometimes you gotta, but in this case, if you're swarming things down, retreat at yellow, so that way another player can start hitting it that's healthy, and so that way you don't get absolutely wrecked. Okay, those are my tips for swarming, because I always see it happening where players literally sad face on a flag, and it's like, why would you do that? We have complete field control. It makes no sense to sad face on a flag or fort or whatever. It's just bad management. You're just not managing your troops and armies properly. Pay attention, retreat when you're on yellow. It makes the most sense, and you'll still get the job done. Okay, tip number 9 also has to do with, and I know we're kind of harping on this rally garrison thing, but this is very important. This is how you win KvKs. Okay, being smart and managing your armies in these scenarios makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if you guys didn't know, whether you're defending a pass or a flag or a fortress, there is a maximum number of armies that can be in this specific structure. Okay, and that number is 100. You can only have 100 armies in a pass, for example, and that's relevant because let's say all 100 armies have 500 troops in them. That's a grand total of 50,000 units. So your flag or pass or fortress or whatever will be quote unquote full at 50,000 units, which is really bad. If you have only 50,000 units in a pass and nobody else can get in and it's being rallied, it's going down, and it ain't happening, chief. It ain't gonna happen. You can't hold with that. Okay, so what you want to make sure is that if you are reinforcing a flag, fort, or pass and your troops get low enough, you want to remove them from that pass, flag, or fort, because at a certain point that pass, this happens usually with passes is when this happens the most, because flags can be swarmed down and they pop pretty quick and all that sort of stuff because their capacity is only 2 million. But this really happens with passes more often than not because they have a really big reinforcement and they can't really be swarmed, or it's hard to swarm and you kind of have to double rally or whatever. But you get my point. My rule of thumb is you want to pull your armies out of a structure when it's about 1% or maybe 0.5% of the total percentage of that structure. Okay, it depends on how many people are online and filling that thing and things like that. So make sure you walk to a pass and reinforce that thing. Oh my god, I'm so cringe. Wow. Anyway, 1% of 3 million is 30,000. So for me, I'm gonna pull my armies out of that pass when they're maybe under 20 or 15,000, right? That's usually the sweet spot. You can retreat under 30 if you want, if you've got like a ton of people online and like people are eager and trying to get in, they can't. But really, like between 0.5% and 1% of the total capacity, that's when you should pull out. That way other people have a chance to get in and you're not bloating the pass full of these tiny marches that have like 700 troops or 1,500 troops or something. Like you're filling the pass for no reason with troops that are just causing more problems than they are solving. So always keep that in mind. Don't let your armies get too low. Now moving on to tip number 10. This is tip number 10, and that is which commanders should you use to reinforce a flag, fort, or pass? The answer is you probably don't want to use your meta marches, because if you're going to be reinforcing a flag or a rally or something like that, then you really want to make sure that your best commanders with all your gear and armaments are available to fight in the field, right? It's still important to fight in the field even if you are reinforcing something. And so what you want to do is fill that pass, flag, fort, whatever rally with commanders that are meta adjacent, that typically have a higher march speed or a higher troop capacity or something like that, that makes it easier, just a little bit easier for them to get in and out of that rally, flag, or whatever, but not so bad that they get wrecked on the way there. Okay, so I've seen some people just use like random epic commanders. That's a bad strategy. Okay, don't put epic commanders in things. I know it technically doesn't matter during the running of the rally or the flag or whatever, but it will matter on your walk there, your walk back. If you're in between and you get hit by AoE, like your epic commanders are going to crack. Okay, so a lot of times I see people use commanders like Caesar, who is he meta? No, but he does have 15% more capacity and his relic gives him a ton of march speed. Same thing with commanders like Ethelfled. She's not meta, but again, her relic gives her march speed, and typically you'll have a little bit extra troops on her as well. So really you want to get in and out of things with fast commanders that have high troop capacity, that are a little bit tanky in case you get hit by AoE, but again, you don't want them to be your meta marchers. So for example, like Nebu is a great commander to use to reinforce archer rallies or garrisons, because he has decent amount of defense, he has march speed, things that you care a lot about, but he's not necessarily meta. And I know some players are still using him in like a 5 army lineup or really a 6 or 7 army lineup, but he's just a good example for me as someone who only uses one archer march. He's not in that archer march, so if I'm going to reinforce something, I'll use Nebu. Now on top of that, you have to keep in mind, what formation are you using? The triple line formation is okay, but specifically for reinforcing armies or garrisons, you want to use the staggered formation. This is going to give you 15% march speed when marching to join a rallied army or garrison. Okay, this is the way to do it. You're going to move much faster in between, even if you're only on the map for like a second, going from a nearby city to a flag. That 1 second matters a lot. If you can get 15% march speed there, you definitely want to do it. Okay, so use the staggered formation to reinforce things, and use commanders that are meta adjacent and not garbage. Okay, that is my recommendation for you. don't tie up your meta marches reinforcing things that makes no sense. And moving on to tip number 11, this is going to be a tip that you can use to really annoy your enemies, and that is going to be blocking the ability to reinforce, quote unquote blocking. You're not actually blocking it, and it just makes it a little bit harder. Blocking the ability to reinforce a flag or a fort or something like that. You can't really do this for passes, but what you can do is you can move your armies directly on top of, and I'll put them on top of Phil's farm here, his 4th farm. Okay, what I'll do is I can move my armies, and you can see right now really my Huo is doing, or sorry, my Liu Che is doing the thing that the game wants, and that is being routed around the city. Okay, you want to, like, the game ideally would want you to walk around the city, but my other armies here, you'll notice they're literally in the city, like they're literally on top of that city. Okay, and that is relevant because what you want to do is you want to try to make it really hard for your enemies to reinforce a specific pass, flag, fort, or even allied city, right? So right now the only one that's misbehaving is Liu Che, so I can kind of like just mess with my Liu Che a little bit, and sometimes it takes a couple of different a couple of different tries here, and sometimes you have to like mess with it. It looks like right now my Liu Che is just not doing it. Okay, he's not doing it, and they're working on making this better probably, but for the longest time it's been known that you can effectively keep your armies inside of a city, or, and I say inside, on top of basically a city or flag. And what this does is, let's pretend this is an enemy flag, okay, and this is an enemy city that's right next to that flag, and players are just funneling into that city and then into the flag, and they just jump right back and forth, and it's really quick, and it's hard to stop that, right? What you can do is you can put all of your armies either on top of the player city, so that way when they click and drag, right, they click and drag the enemy, they click and drag to join that city, to hop into the city, they will sometimes accidentally click and drag onto your march and start hitting you. Or if you're not going to take AoE from whatever that garrison is, then what you can do is you can literally, and remember we're pretending this is a enemy flag, you can stack all of your armies on top of that enemy flag, and again, as long as there's no AoE in the flag, or there is like no AoE commander, or as long as the person rallying and swarming that flag is not in the same alliance as you, then you can just stand directly on top of that flag and make it really hard for people to join that flag, right? They're going to click and they're going to try to drag and reinforce, but pretend there's 30 armies or 50 armies on top of this flag, they might accidentally click and drag and start attacking whoever's standing on top of it, right? So that is a huge strategy that you want to use. Again, keep in mind you don't want to take AoE, you will take deads from that, okay, so that will wreck you. But assuming you can't or won't take AoE, then the best strategy to mess up your enemy and make it harder for them to reinforce a flag or a fort or a city or whatever is to just stand directly on top of it. Now what this will force the enemy to do is the enemy will have to reinforce from the war screen in their alliance center or the alliance tab, and if you have a bunch of people scouting that flag, it's going to move that flag around on this war map, right? And so sometimes it'll be really hard to like figure out which one is, and you gotta, and so it's not impossible to join it, right? It's just annoying, and that's the name of the game. Make it harder for the enemy to reinforce things, and that will help you out a ton, even if it is annoying and probably not intended by the developer. And tip number 12 has to do with troop management. Okay, this is something that I see a lot of newer players mess up, and that has to do with going all in at the beginning of KvK. Do not zero yourself in the first zone of fighting, okay? Unless you have like an opportunity to completely destroy your enemy, then there's no point in really wasting a ton of resources on this first zone unless you're going to be gated otherwise, right? Really, zone 5 doesn't matter that much. There's some bonuses here for you guys to capture, like 10% march speed isn't nothing, it's definitely worth getting, right? But like what you want is to save a majority of your troops for pass 7 in Kingsland. Like that's what matters, right? The winners of the KvK are the people that can hold Kingsland, okay? So if you burn through all your troops in zone 5, then come Kingsland, you're not going to be able to field with full armies, you're not going to be able to stuff flags and rallies with troops that matter a lot, right? So I know players are eager to fight in KvK, and so this first zone might be a great opportunity to go all in, but keep in mind, if you're going up against a really strong alliance or kingdom that knows what they're doing, they're probably going to be filling things in zone 5 with farm accounts, right? Filler accounts, burner accounts that don't really matter. They'll just put a good garrison there, and then they'll fill it with like farm troops, and then you're crashing your main account into their farm troops, and you might think, you know, you might be trading positive, but all in all, your kingdom or your alliance is literally wasting troops on a zone that barely, like, again, it matters, but it's not what's going to win you the KvK, right? A KvK is not decided by the outcome of zone 5, or I should say it's extremely rare that that is the case. Okay, maybe there's been examples in the past. I don't think I've ever been in a KvK where zone 5 was make or break for the KvK. It just, in all the years I've played, it's never worth going all in on zone 5. It's way better to save your steam for later in the KvK, because you don't want to be useless. And this usually happens a lot with players that care more about their kill points or their DKP than anything else. They just want to make it look like they've contributed a ton in KvK, and so they go all in early on, and then later in Kingsland they're AFK or whatever, and it's like, bro, like that was not helpful. You thought that you would trick people by doing that, but it didn't work, because a lot of kingdoms will just track your stats the whole time, right? So don't be that guy. It's really annoying unless you've worked out with the leadership, like, hey, I'm not going to be here for Kingsland, I'm going to go all in, or I'm going to quit after zone 5, whatever the case might be. But really, most of you, if you're looking at winning Kingsland, don't waste all your troops in zone 5. It doesn't make much sense. And the bonus tip that I said earlier in the video is something that not all players can do, but if you can do it, you should. That is playing on PC. Now, with the introduction of quick command, this is not as game breaking as it was before, but I still think that a decent computer is going to outperform most phones, even like modern phones, even up-to-date phones or tablets. I still think most decent computers are going to outperform them. And I feel like the hotkeys that you get from using a keyboard is huge. I press the A key and it will select all of my marches. Okay, I have the hotkey set up to do that. So if I move all my armies out here onto the field, then I can select all of them by just tapping on the A key. You'll see both of them are selected, and that is super helpful. So I can smash the A key to always be selecting all my armies, and it's great, right? I don't have to come over here and like double click and like double tap that and then click and drag. Like, you don't have to worry about that. You just boom, you select all, boom, you select all, that's it. And then boom, I move, boom, I move, that's it, you're done. I think mouse and keyboard is a huge advantage over using a touch screen, and you're playing the game on a larger screen. Now, it depends on your computer. If you have a 24-inch monitor, 27 or a 32-inch monitor, like, seeing all the little details of things on the screen is a huge advantage. Okay, being, you know, playing on a tiny phone, can you make it work? Yes. Is it better with quick command than it's ever been? Yes, but you're not going to be able to see as many details as possible, and also your finger is going to be bigger than the dots in dot mode, most likely, right? So I don't want you guys to, you know, get it twisted. I think it's great that we can play in quick command now on phones and tablets, and it's a huge improvement, but it's still much better to play on PC. So if you can play it on PC, definitely do it. You do not need an emulator. There is an official Rise of Kingdoms PC client. It came out a few years ago. I'm only saying that because I still get some people like coming back to the game and they're like, oh my God, I don't have to use an emulator anymore, this is great. Or like, oh my God, I thought I had to use an emulator, how are you playing without it? Like, so play on PC, do it the right way, and it'll be a big advantage for you. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully all of these tips and things to avoid help you out in your next KvK. If you guys knew all of these tips, then you definitely should drop a thumbs up on it and comment down below and say, Omniarch, I didn't learn anything from you because I am a Giga Chad player. I know what I'm doing. But hopefully you guys learned at least one thing from this video, and that you'll drop a thumbs up as well while you're down there. It helps out the channel a ton. It'll push this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And while you're down there, consider commenting. Let me know what you think about these tips. Any other tips that I missed, let me know in the comment section below, and subscribe to the channel while you're down there, and click the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.